Hello again. I'm sorry, I have to be a little bit quiet. I'm in a hotel right now, so I can't be my usual loud self. I'm up in West Virginia visiting family, and we're coming up for the WVU football game, WVU UCF. I got my UCF gear on. We got the game tomorrow. It's been snowing all day. I'm freezing. But I realized that you guys have a test next week. And so I wanted to go over and just run through a few more topics. So, last topic that we went through, we did the different types of epithelial tissue, and we went through those different types. So, remember, when we're talking about tissues, what you need to have memorized here is that we need to talk about. Is there no way to draw on this? No, there isn't. So the first thing that you need to know when you're talking about tissue is what are the four tissue types? So think in your head, if the human body is only, remember we have atoms to molecules, molecules to macromolecules, macromolecules, then we went to organelles and the organelles to cells, and you had a bunch of cells that got together to form a function. Those were tissues. The human body, if you are going to talk about like any organ in the body and say, what's it made up of? It can only be these four tissues. So there's epithelial. And remember what epithelial tissue is. It's all like the coverings of your body. It's all of your glands. It's all of the inside stuff to protect you. It's what the coverings on your organs. And we had the 8 different types of epithelial tissue, so you should be able to go through and tell me those 8 different types. Then there was connective, nervous, and muscular. Nervous and muscular are going to get their own chapter in the future. We need to know a little bit about those, but the next big one is essentially looking at connective tissue. So what's the first thing that you need to know about connective tissue? What you need to know about connective tissue is you need to close your eyes and you go, what are the 5 types of connective tissue? There is fibrous connective tissue. There is cartilage, and there's bone, blood, and fat. Those are all connective tissues. Well, what does it mean to be a connective tissue? What is connective tissue made out of? Well, that's something that you should also know. And I don't like that I can't write on this, so hold on one sec. Okay, I think that's better since I can draw on that now. Okay, so you have epithelial, you have connective, you have nervous, and you have muscular. We already know how to find epithelial tissue, lumen, apical, base, basal. You have the membrane, basement membrane. They're all smushed together, 1 layer, 2 layers. Now we're in the connective tissue. Connective tissue, there are 5 types that you need to know. These two are the same here. There is fibrous connective tissue, cartilage, bone, blood, and fat. So what is it made out of? Well, connective tissue is like every other thing. What is all living tissue made of? Cells. All right. And connective tissue is a bit like Taco Bell. Taco Bell is some sort of arrangement of meat, beans, and cheese. And like you just, in a chalupa, you just have it like a fried one. Burrito, you just wrap it up bigger. Taco, it's like this hard little shell, but it's all relatively like the same ingredients, but they're just kind of arranged differently. And that's really what connective tissue is. But all connective tissue is going to have cells. The cells are going to be floating around in some sort of other goo. So this is kind of like the meat, and then we're going to have the accessories that are with it. So what are the accessories? Well, you have 2 parts that are combined in this thing called the extracellular matrix. And if you think about it, here's the cells. What does extracellular mean? Extra means on the outside of the cell. So, and the matrix is this combination of things. So essentially, you're going to have these cells that are kind of floating around in this matrix of stuff. Well, what's the matrix of stuff made out of? It's going to be made up of fibers and this stuff called ground substance. Okay. Ground substance, you can think of like kind of like a goo or a gel that everything is floating in. Kind of like, I mean, it's not exactly like this, but just to kind of make a point, this is like a cytosol, right? It's like this goo that everything's going to float in the connective tissue. But then there are 3 different types of fibers, and those 3 different types of fibers are going to be collagen, elastic, and reticular. Now, these different fibers have different properties to them. So collagen is real stretchy. So it's real stretchy and it's strong. It's not super stretchy, but it's resistant to stretch. But it stretches a little bit, but it's like nice and resistant and strong. Elastic cartilage, very stretchy, or elastic fibers, very stretchy fibers. And then reticular, this is more like a scaffolding. And so these connective tissues, they all kind of have different properties and different functions. And that is going to be determined by the combination of cells, the different types of ground substance. There are different types, but you don't need to know them. And then the different types of fibers that you have. So, for example, like dense fibrous connective tissue, you're going to find that in things like your ligaments. And what do ligaments do? Ligaments are going to hold bone to bone. So, think about your ACL. Do you want your ACL to be really elastic? Do you want it to be really stretchy? Well, what does your ACL do? It prevents your knee from hyperextending. It helps prevents your tibia from hyperextending off of your femur. So you really wouldn't want that too lax and stretchy, right? So you're going to find a lot of collagen fibers inside that dense fibrous connective tissue. Um, So when we talk about these different fibers, it's going to be or these different tissue types, there's going to be some sort of combination of cells, fibers, and ground substance. So make sure you know this, like what is connective tissue made out of? Make sure you know the three fibers. Okay, so now we're going to get into our different tissue types, our different connective tissue types, and we're going to explain each of them. So again, what do? You got to go through this like step and procedure and protocol every time. You got to do the same thing every time. So when you're looking at a tissue underneath a microscope, what's the first thing that you're looking for? You're going to look for a lumen. If you don't see one, well, you're probably not looking at epithelial tissue. Now we're going to look at to see if it's muscular tissue, and we'll see ways of doing that. Let's just say it's not muscular tissue and it's not nervous tissue. So we've decided it's connective tissue. Well, how do you know it's going to be connective tissue? Well, if you see cells and you see fibers, you pretty much know you're looking at connective tissue. Now you got to decide, what is it? One of the five types of connective tissue. So let's take a peek here and go into these a little bit bigger. So actually, let me see if I can find another set of notes here. Hold on. Okay, cool. All right, I think I got some slides here. Perfect. I'll upload these for you. Okay, so let's look at this picture now and try to decide what we're looking at. So if we look here, we can see that there are cells. So let me draw. Where are the cells? Right here. Boop, boop, boop. You see all these cells here? All right, cool. Now, the other thing is, do you see a lumen in here? I do not. So it's not epithelial. And how else do you know it's not epithelial? Because remember, epithelial, the cells are like all jammed up next to each other. Look at these cells. Are they jammed up? The other thing that you're looking for is these things. What are these things? These are fibers. So we've got cells, and we got fibers. What else do we have? Well, all the stuff it's floating in is ground substance, and that's the extracellular matrix. So you know you are looking at connective tissue here. Now the question is, what connective tissue are you looking at? Well, there are five types: fibrous connective tissue, cartilage, bone, blood, and fat. So in this case, we see cells and fibers. So this took me way longer to learn than I would like to admit, but this has fibers. So this is going to be fibrous connective tissue. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at fibrous connective tissue. Now, that's called areolar connective tissue. Now, what are the different types of fibrous connective tissue? Well, so here's the ground substance. Here we talked about extracellular matrix, fibers, and ground substance. Here are the three fibers that you need to know. Now, this is going to be, again, what's called areolar connective tissue. But when we look at fibrous connective tissue, we can label this in two different flavors. So what do we have? We have connective tissue. What are the five types of connective tissue? Fibrous, cartilage, bone, blood, and fat, or adipose. So now we are in the fibrous connective tissue. So this is going to be the next level of that. This is a subcategory. So in the subcategory of fibrous connective tissue, what are we looking at? We have two flavors. It's called loose and it's dense. So what does this mean? Well, if you look at this picture here and these cells, do they look smushed together or do they look spread apart? And you would say, well, they're definitely spread apart. So if they are spread apart, what would you call that? Would you call that loose or dense? Well, they're spread apart, so they're loose. Now you have two types of loose connective tissue. You have areolar and you have reticular. Areolar is this pink one that you're looking at. And where do we find that? So this is, oh, hold on, let me turn this up. That's too loud. I'm gonna turn the heater off and freeze for you guys. Um, where's areolar connective tissue found? Now, this is the beauty of where we're talking about structure versus function. So, or structure dictating function. So you remember epithelial tissue. What was super special about epithelial tissue was that it was avascular. Why? Because the cells are too smushed up next to each other. There's not enough room in there to be able to have a good blood supply. So we have, and if we looked at this, what is this? This is simple columnar epithelial tissue. Now, this is going to need ATP and oxygen and all that. Where's it going to get it from? It's going to get it from the tissue underneath. That's going to supply it. But we don't need the stuff to be smushed up in there. So what do we need? We're going to need a loose connective tissue. So there's fibers in here, there's cells, but since it's loose, it has room for blood vessels to move around. So where do you find areolar tissue? Always underneath the epithelial tissue. Always underneath. See if they've got this in the slide here. I don't think that they do. No, they don't. We're talking about membranes. Okay. Now, the next one is reticular. And where do we find reticular? Reticular, you're going to find in our immune organs. So you're going to find this in the lymph nodes, and you're going to find this in the spleen, the thymus. This is going to have reticular fibers. Areolar is going to have collagen and elastic fibers. Now, the next one that we have, flavor, if you see fibers and cells, is going to be dense connective tissue. Dense comes in two flavors, regular and irregular. Dense regular, you're going to find in your tendons and your ligaments. Dense irregular, you're going to find underneath your skin, underneath your epidermis. It's going to be under the areolar. This is going to be your dermis when we get into that chapter. And the dermis is made of areolar tissue on the top and then dense irregular connective tissue in the bottom. So the dermis is made of two things. And this is kind of holds the skin on. So the areolar connective tissue has room for blood vessels to supply the cells. And then the dense irregular is going to kind of hold it on there. All right, so just to review real quick, you have to keep doing this to be able to remember it. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard. So you say to yourself, what are the four types of tissue we have in the body? Epithelial, sorry, nervous, connective, and muscular. Doesn't have a lumen, and then it doesn't look like nervous, doesn't look like muscular. We're on our connective tissue. What are the five connective tissue types? There's fibrous, cartilage, bone, blood, and adipose or fat. Now, what are the two types of connective tissue? There's loose and there is dense. What are the two types of loose? Areolar and reticular. Where do you find areolar? You're going to find that underneath epithelial tissue. It's loose, so it has room for blood vessels to travel in to supply those cells. Because what? Because epithelial cells are avascular. They don't have vascular. Then we're going to have reticular. We're going to find this as the scaffolding for our immune organs, for our lymph nodes, our tonsils, our spleen. Okay, dense irregular or dense connective tissue, you have regular and irregular. Where do you find this? Inside of our ligaments and tendons. This is going to be that second layer of our dermis underneath the areolar connective tissue. Perfect. Now, let's go ahead and do bone, blood, and fat because they're very easy to do. So let's go back and look. Adipose tissue looks like it's a bunch of empty cells. So you see here, when you look, you see these big empty cells here, these big empty things. The cells are kind of in between like this. And then you have these big empty spaces. This is where you're going to store your triglycerides. So adipose is pretty easy. We know the function of that. It's for storage of energy. Then if you look at blood, see if that works. When you look at blood, what do you see? You've got tons of these little red blood cells. And what are these guys in here? Well, let's look at another slide. I think I got a better one on here. Ah, here we go. Let's zoom out. I'm sorry if this picture's a little bit blurry, but you see these are red blood cells right here. And then these are white blood cells. And then these little fragments, those are your platelets. So your blood is considered a connective tissue. It's kind of weird, right? But it's got cells. It's got an extracellular matrix. It's made of ground substance. The cells, you're going to have white blood cells, you're going to have red blood cells, and you're going to have platelets. And then you're going to have proteins and stuff inside when we get to the blood chapter. But that's blood. So you can easily see that. You can easily see adipose tissue if you're looking at pictures of that blood. And then look at bone. Bone is going to get its own chapter, but look at that. It looks like trees. You say you can cut a tree open, you can tell how old it is by counting the rings. Well, you can do that with a human. You cut open a bone and you count the. I'm just joking. You can't do that. Don't tell people that Professor Henderson told you that. But it's easy to remember that this looks like trees, so that's bone. Okay. So that leaves one more. One more. So we've got fibrous connective tissue, which we looked at. So we see this. We saw, no, not that one. Areolar connective tissue, fibers and cells spread out. That's loose connective tissue. So fibers, cells, loose connective tissue. You had reticular, which was in the loose. And then you had dense regular and dense irregular. Now we did bone, blood, and fat. Blood, bone, fat. Those are easy to recognize. Now the last one is cartilage. Cartilage is a little bit more difficult to recognize, but the best way to do that is if you see this. These guys right here. Those are love bugs. That's what, if you're not from Florida, maybe you don't know. But in Florida, every year we get these bugs that one goes like this, and then the other goes like this, and they attach to each other, and they fly around, and they get hit by your car, and then they melt your paint on your car. So that's what this is right here. You can see them, they're stuck together like two fried eggs, like if you fried two eggs together and they got stuck. If you see two cells like this, you are looking at cartilage. Cartilage. Looking at cartilage. There are three types of cartilage. There's going to be hyaline. There's going to be elastic. And then there's going to be fibrocartilage. Now, hyaline cartilage, you can tell hyaline cartilage. Now, so the difference between the cartilages is the fiber density and the different types of fibers. Hyaline cartilage, you're going to find on your tips of your bones. That is your articular cartilage. So where you have two bones come together, you're going to have some really glassy, smooth cartilage on there, and that's going to make it so that it's almost friction-free. Then it's also what the fetal skeleton is made of. Elastic cartilage is going to be made with mostly elastic cartilage. So this, you can't even see the fibers here, right? There's these thin little fibers. That's how you know you're looking at hyaline cartilage. It looks like glass. Elastic cartilage, you're going to see Elastic fibers. Where do you need elastic fibers? You're going to have that in like your ear and in your nose, like anywhere that you need something to be kind of stretchy. Fibrocartilage is going to look kind of like this, but it's going to have these really dense fibers. And those dense collagen fibers, remember, they're really tough. You're going to find this in places like your discs of your spine, the meniscus of your knee, the pubic symphysis in between your two pubic bones, somewhere that needs to be resisting compression, like your vertebrae. And that's how you find your cartilage. So I think I think we've got them all here. Okay, those are all like examples. Okay, so just to review, let's review. What are the five types of connective? Well, what are the four types of tissue? Epithelial, connective, nervous, and muscular. What are the five types of connective tissue? Fibrous, cartilage, bone, blood, and fat. What is connective tissue made up of? Cells and extracellular matrix. What is the extracellular matrix made out of? Fibers and ground substance. What are the three types of fibers? Collagen, elastic, reticular. What is fibrous connective tissue? There is loose and there's dense. What is loose connective tissue? Areolar and reticular. Where do you find areolar? You find that underneath the epithelial tissue. Since it's loose, it has room to supply blood to the avascular epithelial tissue. Dense irregular connective tissue comes in, or dense connective tissue comes in regular and irregular. Where do you find regular? If they're all in kind of a line together, and we are going to find those in things like your tendons and your ligaments, stuff that's a predictive stress. The loose connective tissue, or I'm sorry, the irregular connective tissue, you're going to find in underneath the areolar tissue. It's the second layer of your dermis. Then cartilage. What are the three types of cartilage? There is hyaline, which is smooth and glassy. It's got thin collagen fibers. Then you have elastic cartilage, which is going to have elastic fibers in it. So you can see a picture right here. You can see the love bugs. Remember, how do you know you're looking at cartilage? You're going to see two cells that are kind of like this together. You're going to see a bunch of those. And then you look for the fibers, smooth and hyaline, that you're going to find in the tips of your bones in the fetal skeleton, elastic cartilage, like the tips of your nose and your ear, and then fibrocartilage is going to have thick, dense fibers. And where you're going to find that? You're going to find that in the discs in your spine and in the meniscus. That's where you're going to find the cartilage. Okay, and then fat, empty cells. You see empty looking things. It's for storage of energy. Then you have bone, looks like trees, and then blood. You see red blood cells, white blood cells, and little fragments called platelets. And that's connective tissue. You should be able to go through and say that. You should be able to say, what are my five types of connective tissue? Close your eyes. Go. What are the five types of connective tissue? And be able to say it. If you can't say it, you're not going to know it for your test. If you can say it, maybe you get it right. And then know the subtypes. As far as this chapter goes, you need to know the types and then the different subtypes and tell what the difference is between those.